These videos are not for children. If you're a children, then piss off.
Hey there, it's me, your least favorite YouTuber, the Infuso, and I'm here to talk to you about one of my all-time favorite movie franchises since I was a kid. I'm talking, of course, about Toy Story. I have such love and fondness and nostalgia for these movies. They played such an integral role in my childhood, and I'm sure a lot of you can probably relate. Toy Story was actually the first movie I can remember watching in the theaters, and it's also the first movie I remember ever thinking was my favorite. Of course, that would change over time, but they're still up there. I begged my parents for every action figure, every piece of merchandise that I could. Remember the bed from Toy Story? Remember Andy's layout? I had that. I mean, I was all in. I love these movies. And even now, as an adult, I still have a lot of love for these movies, because so much of them still holds up. And the way they effortlessly mixed goofy, harmless fun with really heartfelt, sincere, and sometimes soul-crushing moments still astounds me to this day. I mean, don't get me wrong, these movies are really fun, but they can also get really sad. It was the perfect combination of capturing a child's imagination while still treating its young audience like growing people. The first entry is an absolute classic that managed to capture the hearts of millions. A movie that dared to ask, what if your toys had feelings? A movie that had me double-checking and even triple-checking my action figures every time I left the room. But ultimately, Toy Story is really just an odd couple buddy cop movie, with these two action figures of the law learning how to put their differences aside and learning how to work together as a team in an effort to get back home. It's a pretty simple premise, so the final product has no right to be anywhere near as great as it is. This is going to sound like a strange statement, but these movies really do show you the plight of the toy. You completely connect with the characters and understand what makes them the way that they are. Toy Story is all about heartbreak and triumph through that heartbreak. Woody is challenged by Buzz's sudden emergence and ultimately feels neglected. And Buzz basically goes through an existential crisis, believing that he is in fact a heroic space ranger, when in fact he is a plastic replica. And it breaks his heart to find out that he's not real. He's just a toy. We see the characters at their arguable emotional worst. And yet by the end of it, their circumstances don't really change. They just take comfort in the comfort of each other. Sure, Buzz may be a toy, and Woody isn't Andy's favorite toy anymore, but by the end of it, they realize there are worse things out there to be, like being a toy strapped to the rocket of a maniac youth. Ultimately, Woody and Buzz are bettered from knowing each other. Woody becomes the leader that he was originally thought to be, and makes a complete transformation from selfish to selfless. And through Woody, Buzz learns what it's like to be a toy. By the end of the movie, they call themselves friends, but they feel a lot more like family. Toy Story gave me a greater appreciation for the things in my life. I mean, sure, yeah, it was because I half suspected them of secretly having a soul, but, yeah, something came out of it. Side note, how much therapy did this kid need after this? I mean, granted, he probably could have used some beforehand, but after this one event, yeah, he's definitely gonna need to sit down and talk to somebody for a long time. I think Toy Story 2 is symbolic of the phrase, second is the best. It is honestly, no hyperbole, one of the best movie sequels to a classic that I've ever seen. I put it right up there with Superman 2 and The Godfather Part 2. Unfortunately, this one, like those other two movies, comes with a very shocking lack of Marlon Brando. The plot starts off with a rescue mission gone wrong. When Woody attempts to save a friend, he's instead stolen from a yard sale. And unfortunately for him, Woody's toy napper plans on selling him to a big museum in Japan. Because as it turns out, Woody's actually a very rare and very valuable toy. Best Bud Buzz decides to lead his own rescue mission to save Woody. But by the time the two meet up, Woody's already made new friends, and he's now re-examining his worth. Woody eventually comes to realize that a potential price tag doesn't determine his worth, because it's his bond with Andy that makes his life worth living. Woody's a child's toy, not a collectible. And he shows the other figures in the Roundup lineup that they are too. Woody, Jesse, and Bullseye determine it is better to be loved by those that you know, rather than be beloved by those that you don't. The movie ends with the toys once again returning home to Andy. This time with their plastic and plushy family growing a little bit bigger. And let me tell you something, this was a hit. Toy Story 2 was everywhere. You could not walk out in public at the time without seeing something that reminded you of Toy Story 2. There's marketing for this movie all over the place, there were toys everywhere. Everybody was excited for Toy Story 2. I mean, just ask my little cousin at the time.
Not today, Dog.
That poor kid. As a child, he did a dance one Christmas Eve and mispronounced a villain's name, and now here it is immortalized forever. Hope you're watching this, Tommy Tom, because this is now your legacy. And that was Toy Story 2. And for a while, that's all we were given. But then 11 years later, out came Toy Story 3. And I think this is the first time that there was a spoken group of people who didn't really care for the final product. I chalk a lot of that up to the passage of time. Sometimes you connect to something when you're younger, and then when you're older, you're just like, wow, what the hell was wrong with me? So I'm sure some of the magic wore off for some of the audience. And I also remember a lot of the talk that was behind this movie was that it was just the first two films combined. This wasn't anything original, this was a cheap recap, which I kind of think is bullshit. I mean, sure, it definitely borrows elements and plot details from the previous two movies that worked, but why wouldn't it? It invented a successful formula. Why not follow it? It only makes sense to go back to it. But on top of that, the way that these moments are reassembled makes it feel like a significantly different experience from the first two films altogether. So I can understand where there's a comparison to be made, but there's also a contrast as well. Anyway, like the audience, Andy is growing up. He's about ready to attend college, and as you can imagine, he doesn't have much need for his Buzz Lightyear action figure anymore. Although Andy initially intends on bringing Woody along with him, which would be a hell of a sequel, Toy Story College Days, I'm here for it. Bring me to that alternate universe. Although Andy intends on bringing Woody with him to college, because man, he'd be a babe magnet, through a mix-up, all of his toys end up being donated to daycare. And it's there that the toys remember what it was like to be loved by children, and all the pros, and most importantly cons, that come with it. Woody also winds up at one of the daycare workers' houses, bonding with Bonnie, the daycare worker's daughter. What I find really interesting about this movie is that there's definitely a feeling of time taking its toll. On toys, mind you, but yes, there seems to be a little bit of despair here. There's only several toys remaining and a lot of their friends are gone. Lost to years of yard sales and damages and whatever else happens to toys. While there's still a very loving toy family there have been noticeable losses over the years, which have taken a toll on their overall morale. Etch is gone, RC is nowhere to be seen, Wheezy has wheezed for the last time, and most shockingly, Bo Peep and her sheep up and deeped. Toy Story 3 was the perfect storybook ending to this line of films. Andy's all grown up and moving on with his life, and because of that, Woody and the rest of the toys have to too. It's an interesting look at growing up and getting older, setting aside your childhood. Toy Story 3 is mainly about acceptance and moving on. Putting the past in the past and learning to cope, tolerate, and survive in the present. It's all about learning how to adapt. Inevitably, Andy says goodbye to his childhood, and his childhood gives a heartfelt goodbye right back, passing his toys and the franchise down to the next generation. It was the perfect ribbon tied on the end of the franchise. The logical closure point, the grand finale. Wrap it up, we're not going to do better than this. And then Toy Story 4 came out. Now this seems to be where a couple of people lost their love for these movies. Because this movie, more than any of the others in the lineup, feels completely unnecessary. But also maybe because of a few other issues. The last movie ended the Andy trilogy, and a lot of fans grew up alongside Andy. Many people had a connection with Andy, and more importantly, the toys in his room. They knew how much he cherished these toys. So to see Bonnie, this new kid, have a sudden disregard for his favorite toy, the face of the franchise, may have rubbed a couple fans the wrong way. But to be fair, Bonnie is a child. And this isn't really abnormal for children. Sure, she was all about Woody one day, but then could care less about him the next, but yeah, that's what kids do. One time I let my niece hold a Batgirl action figure I had, because she was staring at it and just kept going on and on about how much she loved it. And do you know what happened when I gave her said Batgirl action figure? She threw it on the ground. And not just like dropped it, like threw it. Like launched it and then slammed it directly down into my wood floor. Intentionally.
Oh, no.
And she laughed at it. And I get you because I was really angry, but then I remembered she is a child, so it's okay. Although I guess it is probably adding insult to injury by having her favor a spork over the star of Woody's Roundup. But I do think it actually speaks toward the innocence and imagination of a child. You know, I also had an arts and crafts class back in the day, and I also wasn't artistic or crafty. I get where she's coming from. This speaks to me. I understand this. In all seriousness, the one thing I have to say about this is that it does lack the point and purpose of the originals. I don't think it has the same strong direction and impact the original trilogy does. I mean, there are some of those elements here. This isn't entirely without merit. The movie is mostly about Bonnie's love for Forky, and like Buzz before him, Woody has to educate Forky on how to be a toy, and how important toys are to the children that love them. But it ultimately feels like these two toys are ships passing in the night, because as Forky realizes his purpose, Woody realizes that his is over. Woody's heartbreak over Andy feels like the sadness a parent feels once their child is all grown up. Job well done, but what's left now? His time with Bonnie is mostly spent in the closet. When Woody experiences the outside world, he reconnects with Bo Peep, who's living a very different life these days, but a happy one nonetheless. Realizing how fulfilling Bo's life is without a child, and knowing that Bonnie's already moved on from him, allows Woody to make a decision to take an alternate path, choosing not to go back home with the rest of the gang, and instead pursue a relationship with Bo Peep. And for a movie series about toys, I gotta say, these children's movies sure do touch on a lot of human adult issues. I really respect that in Toy Story 4, the bad guy isn't exactly a bad guy. She's the plot antagonist, but she's not really malicious. Manipulative, maybe, but not to an awful degree. The only thing that really makes her the antagonist is the fact that she opposes the protagonists. But ultimately, all she wants is to be loved. She wants Woody's voice box because hers is defective, and she thinks the shopkeeper's granddaughter will love her should she be able to speak. Yet when she finally gets what she wants, it doesn't give her what she wants. Well, I mean, not in the way she wants. I guess later, technically, it does, but couldn't have this movie end too sad. Nonetheless, it is a shocking turn of events watching the gang ride off into the moonlight without Woody, seemingly silently saying goodbye forever. Oh, you know, until Toy Story 5 comes out, because that's a thing. That's gonna happen, so get ready for that one. So when did Toy Story die? Well, it depends on who you ask. There are those out there who think the franchise died after 2, with 3 just being a shameless rehash. There are others that claim that 3 was the last good Toy Story and 4 was an awful assassination of the brand. And I can understand both these schools of thought, but I don't really agree with either one. In my personal opinion, I don't think the franchise ever did die. Still to this day, I don't think that we've ever gotten a bad Toy Story. Now granted, Toy Story 4 doesn't need to exist, but just because it doesn't need to exist, doesn't mean it outright shouldn't. Yes, there's definitely a drop in substance and depth, but I don't think there's a drop in quality. Toy Story 4 isn't bad, it's just different. You know, like it wasn't invited to the party, but it's welcome, it's fine that it came. Do I think it's anywhere near as good as the original movies? No, absolutely not. But do I think it's as bad as some people claim it is? Once again, no, absolutely not. I think almost everything done with this IP is worked. Oh, hold on, I said almost everything. I don't think the Toy Story brand has had a bad entry. The movies, classics. That one Buzz Lightyear show, incredible. The shorts, fun enough. The video games, unforgettable, for better or worse. If this brand does have an expiration date, it hasn't met it yet. There's still so much more that can be done, and probably will be done with these characters. Yes, the property isn't in its prime anymore, but still holding up pretty well. I think most people regard the first 2 movies as when this franchise was feeling fresh. But it's, like I said, it's still hanging on there. With all that being said, if you like this video, let me know in the comment section below by leaving a comment saying, I was your least favorite YouTuber, Infuso, and I thank you for watching. Hope to see you in the next one.
I am vengeance. I am the night, and that was Infuso. Just remember, if you're not tuning in, then you're missing out.
So, if you like the words that came out of his mouth hole, and you too would like to become a V-generate, don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching, nerds!
And if you're not joining the fun, you're in for one bad day. And you know what they say about having one bad day?
Catch him next time. Same bat time. Same bat channel.